Let's bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Shannon Bream, who joins us now. Good morning, Shannon.
Hey guys, good to see you. And I love that you're going to do this off the wall, because I think the tricky thing is what are the policies? Because we've heard some of them in the past that it seems like there's a bit of a disavowal now, not from the candidate herself, but statements we're getting through campaign sources and those kinds of things like fracking, yes, no, changing the Supreme Court, yes, no. I mean, there are all kinds of things, so it'll be helpful, I think.
So to follow up on that, Shannon, you're right. It's fracking has been yes, no. Approach to crime has sort of been like hard on crime, soft on crime at various points in her career and positions she's taken. That's been yes, no. I'm curious. One you highlighted, Supreme Court. Last I'd heard, she was open and advocating for the idea of increasing, AKA packing the Supreme Court. Do we know? Is that also existing in the yes, no land? We still don't know Kamala Harris and what she'd do to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, because apparently back in 2019, during campaigning, she talked about having a conversation, being opening to adding seats. Then both she and President Biden during the administration were like, no, I don't think that's the best way to go. Well, now you know that the president has proposed a new set of potential changes for the Supreme Court, and she's apparently signed on to that. So it's just one of the many areas that we don't know exactly what her intentions are. And that's why it's important that, she gets out there. There's so many pieces out there, and it's not just, those that you would think are center-right media, papers and those kinds of things. I mean, it's all over the media landscape now, where we're starting to see some of the mainstream media say, hey, we have questions that we need to get answered. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I'm still waiting to see someone other than Shannon Bream asking those questions. Maybe they could ask her about this, because it wasn't very long ago. We talked a little bit about how now she says she doesn't want to put taxes on people's tips. But it was during this administration that they said they were going to actually charge the IRS, all the new IRS agents that they just brought on, to go after people's tips. And in fact, anybody like Uber drivers who has a, where it's actually calculated and you can prove that they got the tip because it's digital, was very upset about it. How's she going to walk that back?
I do think it's really interesting that she has now talked about this on the campaign trail out west in places, like Nevada and other places, Arizona, where there's a very heavy hospitality industry. And it's a popular line, but it's the exact same line that President Trump started months ago, and the policy position he had months ago. So for a ticket that's going to say Trump's ideas are all bad, they're bad for the economy and everything else, just interesting that she would take something that's been such a high-profile talking point from him and pick it up on the campaign trail. But she says the economic plan is coming this week. There's nothing on the website, the campaign website, about that. So it's going to be helpful. We need that data. As you guys said, I mean, voting is starting within a matter of weeks, and we're still very much on the media honeymoon. So you got to wonder whether any of that correction is going to happen before we actually get to the votes that matter.
Well, meanwhile, our government, I don't know, I guess maybe on autopilot. We're not quite sure what Joe is doing on a regular basis. We do have new images yesterday of him sleeping on the beach in Rehoboth, certainly not in campaign mode anymore. But he did take a moment to do an interview with another network, and he talked about his decision to drop out of the race. It's the first time we've heard from him directly about it. Here's what he said, Shannon.
When I ran the first time, I thought of myself as being a transition president. I can't even say how old I am. It's hard for me to get out of my mouth. Although it's a great honor being president, I think I have an obligation to the country to do the most important thing we can do, and that is we must defeat Trump.
So, Shannon, what do you make of what does the rest of his term look like?
Well, first of all, he's got one more interview in the column than the current vice president, who since he stepped down, he's done more interviews than she has. It's only one. But we're waiting. I think that you guys know, and we've talked about this all over the channel and beyond, about what happens when you're a lame duck president, because we see provocations again. The Pentagon says it was an Iranian proxy that came after our service members, 5 people, including a contractor as well, injured at the al-Assad base. We're going to talk about that on the show this morning, the fact that there have been, 175 attacks since October. So, there are those who do not feel very worried about a Biden-Harris administration. You got to wonder how they feel now about a Harris-Walz administration. But he's talked about doing all kinds of big things before the end of his term. Does not seem like there's going to be the will on Capitol Hill to get any of that done. So maybe the most productive place for him is to get some rest.
Kamala Harris taking a page out of the Trump playbook as she makes a big promise to Nevada voters. in her 7th visit to the key swing state this year.
When I am president, we will continue our fight for working families of America. Including to raise the minimum wage and eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
Eliminating taxes on tips. That promise sounds pretty familiar to a promise Donald Trump has been making for months.
When I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips. There will be no taxes on tips. No taxes on tips.
Are you going to make that an official line item in your economic plans?
Yes.
No tax on tips?
No tax on tips. Very simple.
There you heard Donald Trump with Maria Bartiromo, who joins us now, the anchor of Sunday Morning's Future here with some Fox and Friends. Maria, well, first of all, there's the light side. Wow, what petty theft or grand larceny. But then there's the serious side. How does she reconcile that against the policy she's been a part of with Biden-Harris, where they've gone after, haven't they not, with the IRS, things like taxes on tips?
Yeah, that's right. That happened last year when they were cracking down on tips, wanting to tax them. Look, Will, good morning to you. Of course, it is said that imitation is the best form of flattery. The question now is, will she actually follow through? President Trump has been known to have his finger on the pulse when it comes to economics. He was a businessman, ran a payroll, obviously knows how to look for and actually achieve economic growth. He has shown us that in his own businesses, and there is a reason that most voters trust Trump on the economy over Kamala Harris right now. But I think it's important to ask the question of trust. Can we trust that she will actually carry through and do that, particularly since this ticket is among the biggest tax and spenders that we know of? President Biden's budget for 2025, of course, has already been released, and it includes $5.5 trillion of new taxes and higher taxes. $5.5 trillion of higher taxes. The Wall Street Journal last week wrote this about Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate. The Minnesota tax and spend model. Minnesota has long boasted the highest taxes in the Midwest, including a top income tax rate, 9.85%. That kicks in at $193,000. Only New York and Oregon tax their upper middle class more. This from the Wall Street Journal. Minnesota's corporate tax of 9.8%, also the nation's second highest after New Jersey. And the state is among the few to impose a death tax. Yes, after you pay taxes your whole life, your heirs will have to pay 16% on what you leave them, statewide business property tax as well. So it doesn't exactly jive with what we're seeing from her running mate and what we have seen from Kamala Harris as the vice president. And let's be clear, if she really wanted to cut taxes, she could do so right now. After all, she is the vice president right now. So we're talking about that this morning, certainly, and we are talking about whether or not we can trust if, in fact, that will materialize should she win the White House. But, you know, it's interesting to see the economic differences in both of these campaigns, Trump-Vance versus Kamala Harris-Tim Walz, because they're very different. Very different. You know, President Trump has been very clear in terms of tapping into the energy sector, using the energy capacity in America to bring down inflation because you're bringing down oil prices, as well as create jobs. Kamala Harris has said that she wants to ban fracking. We don't really know what Kamala Harris is going to do because she hasn't articulated it, Will.
Right.
There's nothing on her website at all still that is pointing to what she's going to do should she win the White House. She says she's going to have an economic plan next week, so we wait.
Yeah, all we have, though, is her past. And she was the furthest left voting senator in the United States Senate. It'd be great to see a debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and presidential candidate Kamala Harris. We can figure out maybe the distinct differences between the two of them.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
Off the wall. Off the wall. Disavowal. Disavowal. Articulate. Articulate. Jive. Jive. eliminate, eliminate. Have his finger on the pulse, have his finger on the pulse. Proxy, proxy. Provocation, provocation. Distinct, distinct. Tap into, tap into. Petty theft, petty theft. Grand larceny, grand larceny.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.